Welcome to Handmade History.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Alicia.
And I'm Sonia.
And today we are talking about leather. But first, this episode is sponsored by Folkwear. Have you ever wanted to sew clothing that tells a story? For 50 years, Folkwear has been helping makers bring history to life, one stitch at a time. Since 1976, we've been creating high-quality sewing patterns for historic and folk clothing from around the world. From Victorian blouses to traditional Japanese kimonos, from Ukrainian embroidered shirts to 1940s workwear. Whether you're a historical reenactor, a costume enthusiast, or simply love the artistry of traditional clothing, our patterns combine authentic design with modern sizing and clear instructions. As we celebrate our 50th anniversary in 2026, we're honoring 5 decades of helping sewists connect with the past through their craft. Join us this year for sewing contests, new patterns, and more. Visit folkwear.com, that's FOLKWEAR.com, to explore our collection and join a community that's been stitching history for half a century. Thank you, Folkwear.
Thank you, Folkwear.
And now, on to the show. So this topic was suggested to us by Jim. Thank you, Jim. Full disclosure, Jim is a longtime family friend, and he has made me and my husband Andrew at least 4 belts. And I got to work with him on one of the belts, and it was very interesting. We spent most of the time finishing the belt with oil and stain to make it shiny and like a nice dark brown color. And I still have this belt. It's very comfortable. Sonia, have you ever worked with leather?
I have not.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, today we'll learn about leather, and maybe it will inspire you. So before we get into leather and the history of leather and how leather is made, I wanted to read this amazing quote that I found from a book called Modern Leather Design, which was written by Donald Wilcox and published in 1969. And it's a really comprehensive handbook. But in the introduction, he writes this: "Before you start your journey, I have a suggestion to make. If you've never before worked with leather, let me suggest that you pop down to the nearest leather or sandal shop and just browse. Feel the fabric and make a point of inhaling a few deep swells as you walk in the door. From that experience, if the richness and excitement of the fabric doesn't captivate you, then my suggestion is to try working in stone. It's you, not the fabric, that's cold." Ouch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's jump in. Sonia, want to kick us off?
So leather is a material made from animal skin or hide, and humans have been making it for over 70,000 years. There's a lot of vocabulary associated with leather. For example, an animal skin is called a hide if it's from a large animal, and a skin if it's from a smaller animal. Leather can be made from all kinds of animal hides and skins, including cattle, sheep, horses, goats, buffalo, pigs, seals, walruses, whales, and alligators. There's even a company that makes leather from fish skin. Leather making is the process of turning hides and skins into leather through different methods of preservation. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, quote, "Leather making is the science of using acids, bases, salts, enzymes, and tannins to dissolve fats and non-fibrous proteins and strengthen the bonds between collagen fibers." A large part of leather making is the process of tanning. Tanning uses tanning agents, or tannins, which can include a variety of materials, such as extracts from tree bark or oil or fat from the animal itself, or mineral salts. During the process of tanning, the water in a hide or skin is replaced with tannic acid, which helps to bind proteins and collagens in the skin. These proteins and collagens are fibrous molecules that give leather its strength and suppleness.
We first mentioned animal skin used in garments in episode 19, Historical Low and No Waist Garments. Skin garments can also include garments made from animal hides that have fur on them, or early forms of leather. The earliest leathers were made by drying animal hides or skins in the sun. Humans also used animal fats and brains as tanning agents. They might also have salted or smoked the skins to help preserve them. Humans also used extracts from plants as tanning agents, and this process is called vegetable tanning. Humans have been doing vegetable tanning as early as 5,000 years ago, and we'll talk more about that later.
First, we'll share more about the process of modern leather making. So first, the animal hide is cured. This is done through air drying, wet or dry salting, or pickling. Next, the cured hides are shipped to a tannery, and there the hides are soaked. This is when hair and other water-soluble materials are removed. This process is often done through liming, which is soaking the hide in a mixture of water and lime.
And I thought we'd take a little sidetrack here and talk about what is lime, because we've mentioned lime before on this podcast. We very briefly mentioned it in the paper cutting episode, number 26. When making paper from rags, people actually soaked the rags in lime in the first part of the process. I found a lot of helpful information on the National Lime Association website, which is very charming. On their Why Lime is Important page, they write, "What do you think of when you hear the word lime? Do you think of little green fruit used in margaritas? Or maybe an illness transmitted by ticks? That's not the kind of lime we're talking about. We're talking about the versatile mineral, the building block of construction, and human progress that is a fundamental part of your everyday life, whether you realize it or not." So lime is a mineral that contains calcium. It's found in limestone, and it has numerous environmental, agricultural, and construction applications, among others. One property that it has that's very useful is that it can absorb things. So, for example, it can be used in wastewater treatment to absorb sulfur oxide. And going back to paper making, a form of lime is actually used as bleach in modern wood pulp paper mills. And in leather making, it's used to clean cured hides.
So back to leather making. After the hides are limed, machines are used to remove the hair and other materials. Then the hides are washed and delimed. Next, enzymes are used to remove proteins that are non-fibrous. This helps improve the color of the future leather and to make it more supple. Finally, the hide is pickled, perhaps for a second time, to clean and soften it. So the hide becomes leather through the process of tanning. Vegetable tanning is one of the oldest methods of tanning and is still used today. The tannins used in this process might come from extracts from roots, barks, leaves, and seed husks of different plants. These extracts are made into tanning liquors. The hides are soaked in these liquors over the course of a few weeks or months. The liquors they are soaked in get stronger and stronger, and this process makes the leather water resistant.
Aside from vegetable tanning, there is also mineral tanning. The tannins in this process include chromium salt, aluminum, or zirconium salts. Similar to vegetable tanning, the hides are soaked in salt or saline baths that get progressively stronger. This process reduces the time it takes for tanning from weeks or months to days or even hours, and it's often used for lighter colored leathers. There is also oil tanning, which uses fish or other animal oils. These oils are pounded into the dried hides and replace the moisture completely from the skin. And this is how chamois leather is made. Chamois leather is very soft and can be wetted and dried over and over again without any damage.
Finally, synthetic tannins can be used. Typical synthetic tannins include compounds called phenols and hydrocarbons. And after the hide or skin has been tanned, it is then dried and dyed. There are several ways to dye leather. You can use a drum, spray, or brush, and you can also stain leather. Then, blended oils and greases are added to finish the leather. These make the leather soft, shiny, and strong, and also help it to shed water. The leather is dried, then reconditioned and stretched, then dried once more. And leather can be made into many things, including shoes, boots, jackets, belts, gloves, saddles, purses, furniture, luggage, bookbinding, and sports equipment.
Because leather is thick and comes from animal skin, it is quite different to sew from woven or knit fabrics. For example, things made from leather might not have seam allowance. The edges of two pieces of leather can actually be butted up against one another and sewn together using a stitch called baseball stitch. Baseball stitch is used to make baseballs. If you picture the stitching on a baseball, you might be able to visualize what we're talking about. And we have a video of a Seattle Mariners commercial that features baseball stitch on our Patreon blog post for this episode. Baseball stitch is also called Old German seam stitch, fishbone joining stitch, saddler's stitch, and lacing stitch. To do this stitch, you need a needle and thread, and you make a figure 8 motion, sewing one stitch on one piece of fabric and the next on the other.
Another stitch used with leather is called saddle stitch, which is not to be confused with saddler's stitch. This stitch is used in bookbinding as well as purse making. In saddle stitch, you use 2 needles and 2 pieces of thread. The pieces of leather are held together, similar to the way you might sew 2 pieces of fabric together. Then you basically do 2 sets of running stitch opposite one another, kind of like a 2-stranded version of the whole-bind stitch, which we talked about in our black work episode, number 24. This produces a very strong seam. And if a stitch breaks in a saddle stitched seam, the rest of the seam still holds together because there are essentially 2 lines of stitching.
When sewing leather, regardless of the type of stitch you use, you can sew very, very close to the edge, sometimes less than 1/8 of an inch. And this is another difference from sewing with fabric. The edges of leather don't need to be finished with thread or hemmed because leather doesn't fray. When I made that belt with Jim, he just trimmed the edge of the belt with a knife, giving it a beveled edge. So now we'll shift gears and talk about some of the oldest leather artifacts ever found around the world. And we'll start with leather armor. I was inspired by my children to look this up because if you have ever played Minecraft, which Sonia, you have played Minecraft, right?
I have, yes.
One of the easiest, with my children, yes. One of the easiest types of armor you can craft is leather armor. So the oldest leather armor might be Chinese rhinoceros armor. In the 1000s BCE, Chinese warriors wore armor made out of 5 to 7 layers of rhino skin, which I think would be really heavy, but would probably also work.
Yeah.
I saw a fragment of Chinese leather armor from almost 2,000 years later in the 700s to 800s CE on the British Museum's online collection. And this was a piece of scale armor. So it was a rectangle made from leather and then covered in lacquer. And it looked almost like a roof tile. There were holes drilled in it, maybe for stringing the tiles together, and it was decorated with stripes and an S motif. A few hundred years after that, in the 1200s CE, Mongolian warriors wore armor made from oxhide. And armor is actually a pretty interesting rabbit hole. People in various countries actually wore quilted linen armor when they were fighting. Could be a potential future episode topic.
Yeah, I didn't think about, well, I certainly never heard of quilted armor.
Yeah.
So moving on to belts. Belts have been discovered as some of the oldest archaeological sites in the world. Researcher Sylvia Prell writes about ancient metal belts discovered in Mesopotamia, sometimes called the cradle of civilization, which is modern-day Iraq. Prell describes, quote, decorated metal sheets or belts that were probably originally sewn onto a piece of leather or textile, which appear for the first time in the early Bronze Age or around 3000 BCE. She also writes about a silver-plated leather belt, which was discovered intact in 1934 at a site called and which dates to the same time period. This silver-plated belt had a rectangular buckle. All of the belts were found in grave sites. More metal belt buckles, implying the existence of belts, have been found at other very old archaeological sites. Sonia Chadwick Cox and Hilda Ellis Davidson discovered a fancy belt buckle at Fingelsham, an Anglo-Saxon site in England in 1965. This buckle dates to the period between the 400s and 1000 CE. Describing the buckle, they wrote, quote, as it lay in the grave, indeed, the metal gleamed, and the front of the buckle has since needed only the gentlest of washing to be revealed in its present smooth, glossy, and almost unflawed state.
Next, we'll talk about leather shoes. The oldest leather shoe was discovered in a cave in Armenia in 2008, and it is 5,500 years old. This shoe is made from a single piece of leather that laces up the front, and it's approximately a size 7. The leather is made from cowhide, and it was discovered stuffed with grass, which might have been a way to help the shoe keep its shape. Based on its shape, it is a shoe for the right foot. It also had compression in the heel and toe that showed that the wearer walked a lot. And in the same cave, a piece of obsidian was also discovered, which likely came from a place that was 75 miles away. It resembles several other shoes in other countries. For example, it's similar to shoes made in various parts of Europe 3,600 to 1,500 years ago, as well as shoes still worn on the Aran Islands in Ireland. It's similar to some types of leather moccasins, which have been made for hundreds of years by Native Americans in North America. And it also resembles a traditional Balkan shoe called the opanki. In an article for National Geographic, Manolo Blahnik, the famous shoe designer, said, quote, it is astonishing how much this shoe resembles a modern shoe. And in fact, commercially made shoes cut from a single piece of leather are called whole-cut shoes and are incredibly expensive. And as a side note, the oldest sandal ever found was discovered in a cave called the Arnold Research Cave in Missouri here in the U.S. This sandal is over 7,000 years old, but it's unclear if its straps are made from leather or from another textile or fiber.
The oldest leather purse was discovered in the town of Leipzig, Germany. It dates between 2500 and 2200 BCE, making it more than 4,000 years old. We have to have a caveat here. No leather was actually discovered. It's not actually a purse, but a set of 100 dog teeth, all pointing in the same direction in the shape of a purse flap. It implies the existence of leather or maybe a fabric bag that has disintegrated. Suzanne Frederick, an archaeologist on the team that discovered it, said, quote, "It's the first time we can show direct evidence of a bag like this." There have been other discoveries that imply the existence of a purse that was made from leather. For example, at the British Museum, there is a gold purse lid from the early 600s CE that comes from the Sutton Hoo site in England. Sutton Hoo is a very old Anglo-Saxon burial site with a huge ship on it, and it was uncovered in 1939. This is the subject of an excellent Netflix movie called The Dig, starring Ralph Fiennes and Lily James.
And the style in that movie, I just love it. Every single outfit.
The purse lid is also incredible. It is a complex design of animal-like figures that interlock. It is inlaid with garnets. These garnets probably came from Sri Lanka. And the hinges of the purse lid are also decorated, and thin gold braid goes around the edge.
Pretty amazing that there was trade with Sri Lanka in the 600s between England and Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Finally, we are going to talk about a mix of very old leather finds from a pass in the Alps, including the largest, oldest extant piece of leather. In the Schniedejoch Pass, teams of archaeologists have found several pieces of leather that date to sometime between 3700 and 2900 BCE. These pieces include a nearly complete set of bow and arrows and a pair of leather leggings. The excavation of this site was very interesting. It's in a snowy, icy pass. Albert Hafner wrote a paper on a series of excavations here and described the environment as, quote, rugged rock faces, vast cones of debris, glacier forelands, moraines, and glaciers. The excavations took place in a zone that is above alpine meadows and just below the end of all flowering plants. The area is only snow-free for a few weeks between August and October. All excavations had to be done in this time frame. And the reason that this site was excavated at all was that the summer of 2003 was super warm and melted a lot of the ice in the area. This revealed artifacts, and archaeologists began to work there. They did not work the way that archaeologists traditionally dig. Typically, archaeologists very slowly uncover the ground of a site. They dig down layer by layer and photograph and catalog any finds. These finds were all emerging from melted ice, so the archaeologists surveyed the area with metal detectors and the naked eye. Basically, they were looking for objects that had emerged. And the timing was crucial. Because of the harsh weather in this region, any biodegradable artifacts, like leather and textiles, that had emerged would be destroyed in a few years. So researchers were eager to go back and work at this site. It was a rare opportunity, and they uncovered 800 artifacts in total. Each artifact had to be radiocarbon dated, as there was no other way to tell how old it was.
Returning to the leather artifacts, the bow and arrow set includes a string of animal origin and a bow case made with strips of leather. As an aside, the bow itself was carved from yew wood. The leather leggings had obvious seams and were patched. A piece of this legging measured 89 centimeters by 60 centimeters, or about 35 by 24 inches. Hafner, the author of the paper, called this, quote, probably one of the largest preserved prehistoric leather fragments ever found. Interestingly, because the researchers chose not to treat the fragment in any way and to simply preserve it in, quote, stable and dry conditions, other researchers were able to do tests to analyze the leather. Angela Schlumbaum of the University of Basel did a mitochondrial DNA analysis on the leather and discovered that it came from a domesticated goat species. This animal is no longer found in Europe, but it is found in Southeast Asia. And Jorge Spangenberg of the University of Lausanne did a molecular isotope analysis on it. He discovered that this leather included a mix of animal and plant lipids, which lipids are fats. This implies that Neolithic people used plant extracts as tanning agents. So by roughly 3000 BCE, people had already started to use complex tanning techniques.
Yes. Which brings us back to tanning. So that is a brief introduction to leather and some of the oldest leather objects that humans have made. Sonia, what do you think?
Like I said, I didn't really know anything about leather making, so that was very interesting. I certainly did not realize about all the different types of tannins. And I had seen, I see videos on Instagram and about like purse making. So I seen the double stitch before, but I didn't know anything about like the history of all that too. And I liked the pass in the Alps. That's a pretty interesting archaeological site.
Yeah, so fascinating.
Yeah. And like find a goat species.
I know. Yeah, pretty cool. Also, have you seen the dig?
No.
Oh my God, it's so good. It will get you pumped about archaeology.
Okay, because there's that story about I'm thinking of the paleontologist woman who finds
Whoa, that's ammonite. That's different. It looks amazing. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for listening. Thank you to our sponsor, Folkwear. Visit folkwear.com and join a community that's been stitching history for half a century.
For pictures and links in this show, visit patreon.com/handmadehistorypodcast and find a free blog post for this and every episode of Season 2.
If you have a question or comment, you can email us at handmadehistoryhosts, that's HOSTS, @gmail.com, or visit our website at handmadehistorypodcast.com. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Ray finds Voldemort